2.
Hey guys, it's Joe and Justin with VMP's Tuning Tuesday, episode 43. Been a busy week with shop work and all that stuff. I'm out on the dyno. Or I was out on the dyno this morning and then Friday and all sorts of days. What's been good in the hood with Justin?
Man, I've been working on new product development stuff as usual, business stuff, a little bit of tuning, but honestly, you've been tuning a whole lot more than me every day.
I heard you got your hands dirty this weekend.
Oh yeah, we pulled an engine out this weekend and put one back in at the old shop. Yeah, we one of our coworkers has got a Coyote swapped new Edge, an 04 GT. So we I sent you the picture of the bearing.
Yep, that was gnarly.
We got the heads off, and I start tapping all the pistons.
And then one goes, dook.
Yep, and I'm like, oh, that's the one with the bad bearing. So we pulled it apart, and the bearing was about a third of the thickness it should have been. So the crank's a little scuffed up. It's stock rods and pistons, so they're going in the trash anyways. So Steven's basically planning to build it for 1,000 wheel horsepower. It has a Gen 3 on it already, on a 2013 Coyote motor. So he's looking at pistons, rods, cams, and like 8 rib, and that's about it. Sounds easy, right?
Yeah,
we've done it before.
Recipe for power.
Yeah.
And I'm under the impression that the engine, when he had originally gotten it, had like ingested water somehow.
Had a broken valve cover from the wreck.
Okay.
It had some water in it, so we don't really know what went through it or where that damage started.
Yeah. Well, that works then. Any questions or anything coming across yet, or?
Yeah, I have one from Facebook right now. Have you all had any issues tuning the new Gen 1 control packs? Seems like I've seen a few tuners having issues uploading tunes, and on some, fuel will stop getting voltage from the ECM.
Oh, well, we found out what that issue is.
Yep. Although in general, I wouldn't say that we necessarily have any specific problem tuning the control pack ECUs.
No, I mean, they're pretty darn easy to tune, aren't they?
Yeah, it's just a matter of making sure that if it's a blower ECU that you have IAT pinned right.
Yes.
Or lack thereof, that you're not trying to pin the IAT into the ECU and that you're doing like a MAF breakout harness.
Normally on 11 to 14 cars that came with a factory setup, Mustang or F-150, we add a pin for IAT2 for the blower system. So that way the computer sees post intercooler air temperature and knows, if the intercooler pump fails, you get higher air temps, you pull timing, all those safety features. Well, on the control pack, that pin is occupied by something else, and the control pack has its own custom strategy to account for stuff being deleted. What other types of, what else is different about a control pack?
No evap,
no PATs.
Fuel pressure set static, which it's relatively static to begin with in those ECUs.
I mean, Ford actually did some cool stuff with the control pack. It's kind of written to just be dropped into a car and run with whatever you throw at it.
Yeah,
But
and recently they released a new version of the control pack that triggers the fuel pumps differently.
Right, and that's, besides the IAT, having to do the IAT differently on a control pack ECU for a positive displacement blower, that's what this user sounds like they're talking about, is the issue that you uncovered in a custom Ford Racing strategy that was on somebody's car that works with Ford Racing a lot, and I assume is going to get rolled into production.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. The Ford engineers are saying was the strategy that he now has is what's going to be moved into all the new Ford Racing control packs.
So it's pretty easy to deal with. We've dealt with it before. Just have to know to take that into account, right?
Exactly.
And we do, by the way, the other stuff, the IET stuff I was going on about, we do have a specific MAF breakout harness for 11 to 14 style ECUs and IATs that allows for that IAT1 to be placed after the blower.
Exactly, and one of the ways to get around those issues is with not a Ford Racing, but a power by the hour control pack. Since they use a standard like Mustang-based ECU, you can pin it like you would pin a normal Mustang ECU with downstream air temp and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, because power by the hour, you could still use a regular strategy and just turn PATs off, and actually power by the hour turns PATs off ahead of time for you if you get the ECU through them.
All right. The Cigar Booth on YouTube wants to know what's your opinion on boosting a GT350?
I think that if you want to do it, they make great power, but based on conversations I had, I wouldn't expect it to live very long.
I haven't really seen anybody like race one of those cars a whole lot.
No, I mean, you see them going out there making dyno poles and then making street hits and stuff like that, but you don't really see them being super beat on.
Yeah. So that's a personal opinion thing. We've never, it's such a low volume market, we've never gone into that market.
Yeah.
And we have certain reasons why we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Dale wants to know what's going on with the 18 Roush Charged Mustang, and do we have pulleys and other items coming soon?
The pulleys are kicked off. They're on the CNC machine getting made, so we're getting close on those, a couple more weeks. I have some other parts to test. We're doing some tuning on them. We've got a couple of them in the shop right now. So it's got a badass 2650 blower. Fred, it's different. It's a front inlet 2650 with a stock style throttle body. So that's ultimately the limitation. Fred at Evolution was asking me about intercooler fitment. The 18 car, we've got our heat exchanger, our triple pass dual fan heat exchanger in our 18 car, and it fits fine. So a lot of the same stuff that we know still works just fine.
Yeah, and when you said intercooler, for some reason I thought about the one underneath the supercharger if he was asking about fitment of that, but now you said heat exchanger and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It makes sense now.
Carlos wants to know, have y'all had any issues?
We're down to Murdoch.
David wants to know, hey, this BOOSTane stuff, or whatever it's called, said little more than 2 quarts for 15 gallons to get to 105. Will that be okay for my car? That stuff is expensive. I pay $11 a gallon for 110 octane. Doesn't seem to save me much to try this, but I like the idea if I do long drives. I can pump 93 and add this and be okay.
So Joe, I know you tuned Murdoch's car, and you tuned it, I think, on fuel he brought with him, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's asking about the BOOSTane option.
Exactly.
Sometimes there's manufacturer recommendations, and then there's sometimes tuner recommendations. And we're going to have BOOSTane here next week, so we can delve more into it on the show. But my recommendation usually, and you tune Murdoch's car so you can tell me, tell us, is that I usually just do one 32-ounce can per tank, which is about 15 gallons.
Yeah, and I'm in that same ballpark. I haven't tried 2 cans to 1 tank to a car yet. Most of the stuff that we've done it on, it's been supplemental, not like a setup that's so drastically aggressive that you should really have a race gas in there, but you're substituting a little bit more aggressive mixture of low octane fuel with an octane additive like BOOSTane. And on Dave's car, I know he's wanting to push his car pretty hard. With what Dave's goal is, I'd say that race gas is probably the better bet. But if you were one of those guys with a Gen 2R with like a 79 millimeter pulley, or not 79, a 75 or 72 millimeter pulley,
1 or 2 steps beyond what pump gas would support.
I'd say that's an area where I'd say BOOSTane's a good idea if you're just looking for that little bit more of an edge.
Right.
But I'm still of the opinion that if you want a very aggressive setup, you need to cater your fueling for that. And if you're going to be aggressive, put race gas in it.
Yeah,
If you're going to be slightly aggressive with it, BOOSTane's a good option.
And the way that I look at this stuff is that 100 octane race gas, BOOSTane, great safety margin, lets you make more power, lets you be more aggressive on boost on stock engines and built engines. To me, there's a very clear line. There's the stuff that helps, and then there's the end-all be-all. And you start talking 110, 112, and 116 leaded race gas, that's the end-all be-all.
Yeah.
Of course, until you go E85.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, Murdoch is on a Sunoco 100.
Sunoco 100, okay.
And I forget what they call it, but he was also running like Sunoco's 110. So he was doing either like a blend of 100 and 110 or just 100. Which,
okay.
To me, if it's an actual race gas, I like it more than stuff that's 93 and an additive. But I understand that, like Dave was saying, $11 a gallon, it can get pretty expensive. But
yeah,
when you're looking to party, you got to pay to party.
Yeah.
David wants to know, does it have race gas smell to it?
I haven't really experienced a difference in smell with BOOSTane.
Yeah, I guess we have it.
I mean, to me, E85 smells very drastically different from pump gas.
Yeah, it does.
James Richards wants to know, how much power does cap protection take away on a long pull? What gains over the stock 18 Roush tune can you guys work with your magic?
How much power is lost during cap protection kind of depends on how much more tolerant to timing the engine is at the lower lambda the cap protection commands. And so like if you're talking 18 GT NA, and at 70 lambda, that engine isn't too terribly more timing tolerant than it is at 80, 82 lambda or 85 lambda. So I'd say that power difference between cap protection and not cap protection, it's going to make slightly less power in cap protection, but not drastically so much so that it's 40 horsepower in a setup like that. It'd probably be closer to 10 horsepower on a car like that.
Something to think about. If you're in a really long pull anyways, you're going to start to get heat soak on a stock heat exchanger. Like we have a couple of customers with Gen 3s at like 20 pounds of boost on stock heat exchangers because they're drag racers with ice tanks. But if you go out on the street and you start making highway pulls, you don't have the benefit of the ice tank like you do at the drag strip.
Nope. And I don't know if he's talking naturally aspirated or blower because he did say 18. I know there's not too many. There's not too many boosted 18s out there yet in comparison with how many naturally aspirated cars are out there.
Carrie, was he asking about tuning the 18 Roush setups too?
That was
somebody else.
He said what gains over the stock 18 Roush tune can you do?
Okay. So I don't know if he has a stage 2,
like a stage 1 or stage 2 car.
Yeah,
it's actually
naturally aspirated Roush
stage 3 with a blower.
Well, and I'll sum it up either way. Roush is great at tuning, but a lot of times they go with stock rev limiters, stock speed limiters for like liability reasons and stuff, and there's a lot of performance advantage to be had there. I mean, a lot of times stock torque reduction, not a whole lot of shift pressure. That's where we make the car feel faster and actually be faster.
Andrew Vincent wants to know, actually Travis Schatz wants to know, he says it's working for me. Also, who ported the 18 manifold you used, Justin, in the manifold comparison shootout?
It was CNC ported by Brett Barber.
Andrews wants to know, do you guys tune Explorer Sports?
I think we had that come up. We have a couple different tuning options for them. Most of the time we're just going to use a preload on something like that, but we could technically get into a custom tune if you really needed us to.
I'd be curious if he's talking like traditional Explorer Sport or the Adrenaline.
Oh yeah.
We've done a couple of the Adrenalines, but
the Adrenaline's got a 3-valve in it?
Yeah, 4.63 valve.
Yeah, those are fun.
He's sitting there saying that I would probably go that route once he gets part of his build on his 15 GT done. So that's why I was curious. Roush 727 says, what options do I have to get the most out of my 17 Roush Phase 2 and stay on 93 octane?
That is a great question.
So if you want more RPM than what Roush is able to do with it, and you want to keep the Phase 2 pulley on it, so the 80mm pulley, you're going to have to upgrade fuel injectors to a minimum of the 56s we sell on our website. We can raise the rev limiter pretty significantly at that point. In terms of pulley size on 93, I wouldn't go below a 79. But just that RPM bump and just that, if you want to do the pulley 1mm pulley size, you can get pretty decent gains on that setup. Usually a stock Roush car is going to make or a stock Roush Phase 2 car, manual on 93 octane will make 590 to 620 depending on how happy the car is on the dyno. Usually with our tuning, those cars are 650 to 680 after a 79mm pulley and decent 93
And we're going to want to throw a throttle body in there, right?
Yeah, throttle body is always a really good option for those cars. It bolts right on, no need to do any additional porting or anything like that to get the blades to clear, but the VMP Twin 67 bolts on right in place of the Twin 60.
The 15 to 17 Roush blower, I would almost call like a Gen 1.5 if you go back to our history of blowers, because Roush made that blower pretty darn good. Still has a removable elbow, but it flows well, so there's a lot of potential there. And we've got, we do tons of upgrades for them. The thing that I kind of wanted to define is for 15 to 17, Roush Phase 2 is the hot setup with the booster already in the trunk, the 80mm pulley, and the more aggressive tune. So we just build on that with a little more fuel and a little more airflow and some custom tuning.
Root Beer says, what's the difference between a 6 rib and 10 rib besides 4 ribs?
Mechanical grip.
Pretty much.
That's basically
power.
All it accounts for at the end of the day.
Power, transmission, capability.
Yeah, belt stability.
Belt stretch. More ribs, they stretch less because they can transmit more power without stretching.
Robert Rhodes wants to know, have you guys completed the process for the CAI for the Gen 3 on Terminators?
We do have pretty much all those parts here. They're listed individually on the website right now. We can do 100 millimeter MAF CAI for Gen 3 Terminator. It's also a great retrofit for anybody that's been using our throttle body for any time. It's something that we should do a video on, talking about kind of all the different configurations and why we designed the parts that way and stuff like that. But basically just getting as much air in there as we can while still clearing the extremely tight engine bay of the Terminator.
Ryan says he has a 15 with a 2.3 Roush and 80 millimeter pulley that is tuned by Joe. Debating between upgrading to a Gen 3 87 millimeter pulley 160 throttle or going on pump E85. What are your recommendations?
Those are two very different paths. I'd say if you have to do the or aspect of it, I would go to E85 first. The Gen 3 makes great power and it does really good on 93, but at the end of the day, I think your potential for making power is going to be higher with E85 than it is limiting yourself with 93 on Gen 3.
Yeah, I mean, if you lay the groundwork for E85, you could make a lot of freaking power. Lay the groundwork with E85.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd do Gen 3 and E85 at the same time and then kind of set your boost level wherever you're comfortable with power-wise.
8,900 rear wheel on a stock motor. If you cross your fingers, it'd probably live for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's doing it these days.
Exactly. All the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah.
Matt wants to know opinions on nitrous on a 16 GT and with no other mods.
I think it works great and when used reasonably.
Well, define reasonable, Joe.
150 shot and below.
150 shot and below, and proper supporting hardware.
Exactly.
What do we want to see on there?
I'd prefer a single plenum or single plane intake, like a Boss 302 or Cobra Jet, as opposed to the swippy swoopies.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. I'd want to see 47-pound injectors, some good octane, and if you're going to go single plane intake and do anything more than a 150 shot, I'd really like to see a standalone fuel system for the nitrous setup, so that you're not getting pressure drop in the
return system. Yeah, return
in
system.
the factory return system.
If he's on a budget, what do you think the bare minimum he needs to have is?
JMS makes a pretty well put together kit for those cars.
Okay.
That's relatively plug and play.
A watt switch probably.
I want to say it's a TPS-based switch,
TPS.
Not just like a watt micro switch under pedal type thing.
Electronic watt switch are all the rage now for the past couple of years.
Exactly.
With drive-by-wire.
Exactly.
That way, because if you spray that shit by accident at like low RPM, I've seen intakes blow off and crazy crap.
Yeah, like window switches.
Yeah.
To me, that's perfect. You get tack pickup and you get TPS, so that below X amount of RPM or above X amount of RPM, it shuts off, and below the TPS threshold, it's off.
Like a wet nitrous kit, you actually want to kill it a couple hundred RPM before your rev limiter.
Otherwise, get that nitrous backfire up top because it stayed on when everything was shutting down.
And then I think the only other thing is a bottle heater.
Yeah, a nice bottle heater setup, preferably with a pressure cutoff in case your bottle's overfilled or if your bottle somehow generates heat because it's sitting next to a muffler in a trunk.
On a hot summer day.
Yeah.
On a hot summer day. Jordan says, hey, what's up? I have a question. Would a booster pump help make more power on a GT500 dual pump setup on his 15 GT?
It will not, in and of itself, make more power. It allows for additional fuel flow that you can use to support additional airflow.
And those GT500 pumps, they do respond well to boosting because they kind of run out pretty early. So,
yeah, I'd say on 93 without a booster pump, a GT500 fuel system is really, I mean, if you're not looking at pressure drop across injectors and you're just looking at will it physically flow enough to keep the fuels, or not the fuels, the fuel injectors injecting fuel, I'd say 800 on a gasoline is where their kind of like limit is. Beyond that, they seem to start dropping fuel pressure pretty quickly without boosters.
Dale says, any other ideas on making a better intercooler underneath the supercharger on the 18s with the Roush supercharger?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only gonna be an issue. It really, the more boost you run, the more of an issue it becomes. It's not going to stop us from making power right now, but we are looking at all those upgrades across our lines and some of Roush lines as an option for people that want to make a lot of horsepower.
Steven wants to know, he's got a 16 F-150 with a Gen 2 Whipple, ID 1050X injectors, a VMP fuel pump booster on 93 octane. How much horsepower gain from adding BOOSTane? E85 is not locally available. He's got a 3.625 pulley and 12 PSI.
3.625, oh, it's on a 2.9. So that's actually kind of aggressive on a 2.9.
Yeah, I mean, it's 12 pounds.
But
so
it's a truck setup, yeah.
Yeah, so 10.5 to 1 compression. I'd say that how much power you stand to gain is really dependent on A, how good your fuel quality currently is, and B, how aggressive your tuner's willing to allow the engine to get with either the ability to add in timing via the NOx sensors or by natively adding it in borderline or spark adder, however they want to do it. So I'd say that that's probably a better conversation for you and whoever's tuning the car. But I'd say that with what we've seen around 12 pounds, it's pretty easy to put another 2-3 degrees of timing in a car that was normally on 93. Typically anticipate 10 to 15 horsepower from each degree of timing, depending on how close you are to maximum brake torque, mean brake torque, whatever you want to call it.
Tim says, hey guys, Joe's newest tune on my 09 GT500 with Trinity TBS and stock 2.65 pulley made 604 to the wheel and 608 torque. What should I do next? He's got 56-pound injectors. No, he's asking, do I do 56-pound injectors and a 2.5 pulley? Can I order Deutschwerks pumps over a BAP down the road or fuel first, no pulley?
If you read back through that, did he say 2.4 upper pulley?
Yeah. 2.5.
2.67 pulley.
Okay, 2.67.
Stock 2.67.
Okay, so I'm like, why doesn't he have 56s to begin with?
2.4 and 56s is...
That's the very good recipe for making power on those things.
Yeah.
Right now you're making basically similar power to what a stock 1314 GT500 would make with their pulley. And I'd say that's towards the higher end of what I see them make stock, or at least the middle of the road of what they make stock.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, up there. I mean, really, in the fuel pump situation, I'm not like real crazy about taking apart plastic fuel pump assemblies and trying to upgrade the pumps.
No, if you were going to do anything, I'd say put fuel pump voltage boosters on it. I wouldn't worry about trying to change the fuel pumps out and put something else different in that hat. If I was going to build my car, it'd have a 4-return fuel system put in it if I was going to change the pumps.
Yeah, that way you get real big pumps. You stop messing around with the plastic, because the whole plastic assembly, there's some benefits to it, as you'll find out in a video, but there's also a lot of limitations. I mean, you start thinking about wire size and current voltage drop and all these little tiny plastic hoses and plastic pieces stuff has to flow through.
And then worrying about, like, if you're still trying to run it returnless, popping some of those plastic hoses on transitions and stuff like that when pressure spikes.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it all. That stuff doesn't age well. You get maybe 10 years out of the plastic crap in the tank.
Yeah.
And GT500s are
coming right up on that expiration date for some of the early ones.
Dale says VP Octanium gives you a bit of a race gas smell. Shane says, are 1050X too small of an injector with a triple pump return style for the 2650 for a stock 03 Cobra block, or should I go with 1300X when I'm trying for the 7 to 500 rear wheel? I'm sorry, 7 to 750.
At 750, the 1050s are going to be pretty close to their max. I'd say they're probably going to be 89-90% duty cycle.
Yeah, but it's an 03 Cobra.
Yeah, but that also means the BSFC is lower than like a GT500 engine with the better heads and the better flowing intercooler.
But it's smaller displacement. It uses less air.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with you on the duty cycle, probably going to be around 80-90%. I probably have a log from Rick's car with fuel pump duty cycle somewhere. Hopefully, once the fuel pressure issue was fixed. I hope.
Just the tip situation. Where, oh, that's all I want for right now. And then 6 months down the road, I want 4 more pounds of boost and I want 60 more horsepower. Now your fuel injectors are maxed out. That and how close your fuel injectors are to being maxed out really depends on what we're doing for commanded lambda at watt. If for whatever reason it has cats and it's got to go into cat protection, there goes your injector.
Yeah.
Which most of these guys don't have that, but something for other people to consider. Being at 90% duty cycle, in some cases you'll get by, but in other cases being 90% duty cycle when you still have cats is a bad thing, because let's say your dyno pole's outside of when the car's in cat protection and you're at 79, 82 lambda, but then cat protection's enabled and it goes 75, 72 lambda and your injector duty cycle goes up.
Through the roof.
Yep.
HP Revolution says, what's the stock rear wheel horsepower on a 17 GT350?
Been a while for me, probably close to 430, 440 wheel stock. Up? Damn.
My car would make 450 hot, I think. I think I could get it to 460. And I think I got it, like with some tuning, I think I got to like 475, 479. I did one with long tubes and a cold air at Want to Go Fast, Joe Charles's car, Joe Charles's Fireball. Yeah. It ended up making like just under 5, like 490, 495 with long tubes. But yeah, they're basically figure that the 18 high compression DI 5-liter motor makes about the same power as the 5.2 non-DI motor. So in that 450, 460 wheel range. Well, but 18 up doesn't always make. They don't always make that much. Yeah.
No, they really depended on fuel quality. When
they're tuned and modified, they do with like cold air, because the GT500's got a factory cold air.
GT350.
350.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nick says, how much power are you expecting to make with Rebecca's new engine and the 2650? And how light will you be able to get the car to run times competitive in that class?
Good question.
I assume he's talking about the 1518 car?
Yeah, the 1518 car. Because if you call it an 18, people get mad.
Exactly.
So I've been calling it an 18 lately because I'm just over it. But that class is being set up for Ultra Street, and the TRZ has created a solid axle conversion that is Ultra Street legal as well. I was actually measuring on that car last night for some work that I'm doing on it, and he may have seen some of the posts online. But to answer your question, Ultra Street is a class where the cars make, depending on your weight, around 1200 wheel, and her car in Ultra Street is class legal around 3,100 pounds. So it will be, that new car is just, that's our jump into the world of purpose-built, dedicated race cars. So.
Chris, I just pulled up a YouTube video for the next question. So if you want to let the guys see it so they know what it's pertaining to. We have a question on a video that we released just recently, fairly recently. It says, on the 13 GT500 Gen 3 video, how much BOOSTane did you do when you put the 2.4 pulley on? Chris will run the video so you can see which car they're speaking to, so that way you can actually...
That's all right, I remember it.
Oh, okay.
That car, we actually put a full tank of 93 in it before we started working, because we needed fresh gas in it. It was here for a little while, and so we just poured a whole can of BOOSTane in it. I like Joe and I were trying to convey earlier, like we tend to use additives a certain way, and we tend to use race fuels a certain way. As tuners, we don't necessarily look at the chart on the back and say, "Oh, I want that octane, and I'm going to put."
I'm going to target that octane, and then in the tune, I'm going to enter in 103 octane, and that everything's going to solve itself. It's all about measures of being reasonable with stuff.
Yeah, yeah, we have like our gut intuition as tuners.
If I mix in this much, it'll be around this octane. We'll see what it likes in terms of timing. Go from there and kind of use everything we already know as a basis for which how to move forward.
Yeah,
and what to expect from it.
And then we get on the dyno, we test everything out, make sure that our hypothesis was correct, and then that's what we go with.
Charles Daniels would like to know, would you recommend injectors for an 18 IM swapped 15 to 17 Mustang GT?
I would.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's running E85, especially on an A-cars now for that extra little edge. Go ahead and throw some 47s in it. They're direct replacement, the tall LU47.
And even without E85, just because of that additional RPM, I'd rather see a larger injector in there instead of trying to stretch the, I want to say they're 34s or 38 stock. I haven't done the calculation in a while.
I think they're around 34. Yeah.
Josh Stoker says his 13 GT500 shoots flames with cat protection active, scares the children, and helps clean the mufflers out.
Oh, God, that's funny. We got a funny guy. Scares the children and cleans the mufflers. I like how he backs it up with like a real, like, oh, it's useful.
Yeah, it's regen.
Yeah.
Zachary says, would you recommend a procharger with new headers and throttle body or stage 3 for a 14 V6?
So, stage 3 what?
I don't know if that's a
stage 3 procharger kit?
I'm guessing. Hey, long tube headers on a V6 will make power, help make power. Yeah.
Definitely a tough call. I know that you've tuned a few of the procharged V6s, and I know they're not very timing tolerant. Based on everything you were telling me back then.
I started out like messing with V6s, and there used to be like a gap about like this between the V6 and the V8. Now the gap is like this. So just put your money into a Coyote swap.
Yeah.
Or get a whole wrecked car, swap everything over, or trade it in and get a Coyote.
The people that have the V6 cars do not want to hear that. That is the last thing they want to hear.
I've been there. I've built a 10-second V6, and back in like 2002, when my only competition was a 2-valve, I could run with a boosted 2-valve with a twin turbo V6.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be like, oh, I can run with a bolt-on Coyote, whereas everybody's got blower Coyotes.
Although even to today's standards, your old V6 was pretty fast.
It is true. It is true. Yeah. It was light. It was fast.
Yeah.
Dale says, how much cooling does E85 actually do inside the combustion chamber?
I've never seen quantifiable data on it.
All of it, none of it. You know how we were talking earlier about we make these hypotheses and then go out and test them? The result that we see of E85 is that it is badass. We don't really look at an octane number.
Yeah, and it's getting instrumentation inside a cylinder to accurately detect combustion temperature and combustion pressure is fairly expensive. Even just I want to say it's Persier, it's like PFZER.
Yeah.
The spark plugs that can detect pressure.
Yeah.
Even just getting those inside a cylinder is fairly expensive. But
and you're not going to do temperature really there. You're going to have to infer it.
Or do EGT and then infer what's happening exactly in the combustion chamber.
And I mean, you're starting to get into dynamics of like DI, of injector phasing, cam phasing.
Are you injecting the fuel open valve, or are you injecting the fuel closed valve, letting it sit on the valve, then letting it go in?
And that's like, we know if we make more cylinder pressure safely at the right time.
With the most amount of cylinder pressure with the most amount of airflow.
Yeah, that we make more power.
Because like you can generate all sorts of cylinder pressure with very little airflow. Park the cams at watt on a procharger and see what happens.
That's true.
Pete wants to know, what are your thoughts on the 11 to 14 Gen 1 motor? Are they still considered undesirable, or are they a good platform?
I'd say if you're building an engine, 11-12 block is your best bet in terms of what's readily and cheaply available out there.
The 11s actually got the deeper head studs.
Was it the 12s too, or just the 11s?
I don't know when that crossover occurred. There may be some 12s with the better head studs. But yeah, that's the thing. Like 11 and 12 motors seem to be like more likely to pop a ringland or to break a rod. And then like the belief was that sometime in 13, all the GTs got the Boss rods, right?
I thought it was like late 14.
Oh, really?
They were thinking that they got Boss rods and then phased it into 15.
Yeah, it might have been sometime in 14. Because in 14 there was no more Boss 302, but you get a GT with a track pack, which was almost the same freaking thing.
Yeah, different intake manifold and tune, but
yeah. But that being said, like Joe said, I mean, if you're going to build one, it's a great building block. If you're going to build something, it's still not a bad deal. But I do like how the 15 to 17 motor makes a shitload of power on boost. Like Track Attack would have never cracked 1,000 on an 11 to 14 motor is my feeling. It's just the cam and the head flow aren't there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just based on what I see dyno-wise when we push 11 to 14 engines hard, what we see versus 15, 17.
But we got a 82,000 mile 2011 car that at some point is going to get a blower, and I think we want to put like 24 pounds of boost to it. Have some people standing by with fire extinguishers, because if the oil pan drops and puts oil on the headers, there's the theory that you could have an oil fire. So
that has been proven in practice quite a few times.
So that would be a fun video. At some point in the future, should we try to blow up Chucky?
And thankfully, we haven't found that out here yet.
No, we don't do that shit to customer cars. Chucky was from the junkyard.
And then Track Attack, we tried to do it, but unsuccessful.
Yeah. That was very calculated, though.
Yeah, it was calculated risk, but we were willing to be okay with that risk.
The next question is, when does a 123 JLT become restrictive? He's got a 12 GT500s, long tube headers, return fuel system, E85 Gen 3 TVS, 2.6 pulley, 10% lower. He says he's switching to a Kenny Bell 168 throttle body. So he wants to know, when does the JLT become too restrictive? Also wants to know, can you estimate his horsepower / torque numbers?
I would say that if you're making the switch to the KB168, make the switch to the bigger cold air. If you're staying with a stock footprint GT500 throttle body, like a Twin 60, a CJ65, Whipple 68, VMP 67, L&M 72, L&M 70, all those throttle bodies, the 123 should be fine for the setup unless you were like a 2.4 and a 10%. And even then, the throttle body is more so the restriction at that point than the cold air is. But going to a bigger throttle body like the 160, 173, 168, the Whipple elliptical mono, something to that degree, I'd say you'd yield benefits going to the 148 or PMOS 149.
Yeah, just match the throttle body size to the cold air, because because honestly, there's not a whole lot of big restriction in the 123. People were mostly doing it for mass air range, and then it fits the throttle body nice.
Exactly, and that's the point where, like, if you get into pulley combinations that aggressive with throttle bodies that large, you're going to start maxing out MAF frequency or MAF voltage on a 123 at that point anyway.
Yeah.
So you got to upgrade to begin with. Power estimate 2.6, 10%.
And what fuel did he say?
Body. I don't think he said fuel. We'll assume E85.
Return fuel system E85.
Okay, so E85, 2.6, 10%. Depends on how aggressive they're getting with it, but
so that's like a 2.4 upper only.
Yeah.
Spina's car was right in that 790, 810 range.
And
on
that was
setup.
Do you know how much timing was in that car at that level?
20 degrees, because it was boost, pump gas plus BOOSTane.
Okay. So if he was 22 degrees, 2.4 upper, stock lower, or 2.6 and a 10%, I'd say he'd probably be in the mid-8s without cams. If he did cams, he'd be mid to higher end 9s, depending on how good the cams are.
Yeah. You're going to be, I would say, make at least 8 with it, and then depending on how aggressive you want to get with tuning, go from there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because you can keep it, because it's going to, what's going to happen. It's a stock GT500 motor, right? So they're going to get a little antsy when they see that 800 number on the dyno graph. Well, actually, that's what we did with Cletus's car.
Yeah.
With a 2.6 upper, a big throttle and E90. We made 800 wheel.
Okay.
So he's going to have a 2.4. He's going to have a little more pulley, but Cletus didn't have long tubes. He had fucking stock cats. So I just had to.
That's crazy.
I just had to throw shit at that thing to get to make power. Yeah, you're going to get to 8, and you're going to be like, whoa, but I'd keep on going a little bit more. I get to make at least 825, but it's, I think, like Joe said, it's capable of 850. It's kind of insane what we can do with GT500s these days.
Yeah, I'd say your biggest advantage right now, or biggest thing to do, would be cams. If driving, I mean, they don't even really affect drivability too much. You just have to have reasonable expectations of what's going to be different about how the car drives with cams. Exactly. Exactly.
Sam says on my 17 Roush, he has a 79 millimeter and R93 tune. If I go to your 67 millimeter throttle body, do I need a tune revision?
You don't, in and of itself, need a tune revision. Because you're going to be flowing a little bit more air, I'd like to get a datalog of the setup and just make sure everything's happy at that increased airflow, but it wouldn't be something that'd be absolutely necessary. Although I think he's asked that question before. I don't know if he missed it last time, but hopefully he gets it this time.
Lenzo wants to know what happened to the supercharged F-150 and what's the rear wheel horsepower now?
So is he talking about yours or mine?
I guess. Oh, could talk about either one.
Exactly. I don't think anything happened to either of them.
Yeah, I'm going to guess he's probably talking about the VMP truck. But.
Okay.
It's good. I drove it to work this morning. Makes about 700 wheel. We put some like traction bars on it, put some better tires on it. Haven't raced it a whole lot because it's so hot in Florida and it rains every week. That's kind of slowing down. But yeah, it ended up making like 700, 710.
And I know you guys are looking forward to racing it at Drag Week, but that didn't end up
we
panning
got
out.
shut down on that.
Yeah.
And then a hurricane hit Drag Week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's available as a kit from VMP. We're shipping them out, stage 1, 2, or 3 for the F-150. Makes good power.
F-150. Douglas says, from the video, is there anything stopping the 13 GT500 from going E85 as far as modification?
I want to say that car was making a little bit too much boost for the stock fuel pumps to support E85.
It was, yeah. It was making a little too much boost, but it's funny. I reviewed some logs from somebody else with the same pulley combo on corn, and it was pretty much there. I could see the injectors max, but it never went lean. That was the one I was texting you about over the weekend.
Oh, okay.
But it's if we put E85 in that car, it's on the bleeding freaking edge and just.
So like fuel pump duty cycle maxed out at 5,500 and then just relying on injector compensation till the limiter?
Injector duty cycle maxed out because rail pressure was only 40 psi, which is standard for GT500s, but not a whole lot of pressure. So, but if you had raised rail pressure, you would have maxed out the pumps.
Yeah.
So, and that gray car, like, we did that, and then I put 2 tunes on the tuner, pump and Torco, and gave the customer the keys. You know, if it's our own car, we'll do stupid shit for video purposes.
Yeah.
But that to answer the original question, that's kind of what was stopping it. You could potentially, that's E85 is tough on stock pumps. It's right there at the limit.
John Hartman says, hey Joe, is swippy swoopy a technical term?
It is very technical, John.
Being called out on that.
I knew someone would.
Steven says, any opinions on cooling system upgrades for 14 GT with a Gen 1 Phase 1 setup?
I mean, besides a decent heat exchanger, Gen 1 Phase 1 doesn't really.
Maybe a 170. Yeah, I mean, maybe a 170 thermostat, you know, for the engine side, but like radiator upgrades in GTs, I don't really see a big value in those.
I know that in your Boss, you opened up the front end for open track stuff. Because the 1112s had a little bit more cooling issues open track than the 1314s did. But again, that's not, unless he's doing that specific thing with the car, I don't know that it's necessarily something that I would do.
More power, smaller pulley, higher octane fuel, all that good stuff.
Zach says, what do you consider, quote, sweet on 93 on a PD blower 5.0? My truck, it currently is around 20.5 spark with the knock sensors sensors at minus 2.5-ish.
I'd say that your fuel quality is pretty decent on a truck at 20.5 degrees. With the 10.5 to 1 compression, it really depends on what your downstream air temps are. If your downstream air temps are around 100 to 120, it'd probably be really happy on 21.5 degrees, but that'd have to be pretty good quality 93. If you're talking about BOOSTane, because I know someone with an F-150 was asking about it earlier, if you're currently at 20.5 degrees and you put BOOSTane in it, I'd say that there's not too terribly much more meat left on that bone at the same boost level. You'll probably be okay at about 23 degrees on that setup, but really just got to get some feedback from the NOx sensors and see where it's happy.
Steve says, cooling system upgrade recommendations for a 14 GT with Phase 1 Gen 2.
Was that the same one from before? Phase 1 Gen 2 cooling system
One was
upgrades?
Phase 1, yeah, one he said Gen 1 Phase 1, now he's coming to a Gen 2. Phase 1 Gen 2.
Pretty much same recommendations. I mean, if you have our VMP kit, you probably have the triple pass dual fan heat exchanger. We don't sell many of the stage 1 non-fan heat exchangers, so.
Sam wants to know, when will the 17 ice tank be available?
We're probably about 3 to 4 weeks out on that. I know that there's a drawing that's being done for them. You know, just manufacturing processes sometimes get bogged down in all the steps. So we have a drawing, we have the design done, but now it has to be drawn and some other, you know, optimized for manufacturing. So we're probably still a little ways out on that.
Terminator Lou says, what up, Joe? Quick question. I got your tune this past Friday for the 18 intake with CMVC, deletes, cams, and all the typical bolt-ons. What's the turnaround on a slow-rev datalog?
Under 5 days, some cases within 2-3 hours. It really depends on where we're at in a datalog's review. Standpoint.
And our standard for non-expedited stuff is what, 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
So Joe and his team are, you know, usually hammering away on that stuff. If it's within our, if you're outside of our standard, just let us know and they can make sure they get some attention to it. Sometimes they get a little buried, but.
Robert says, 2 quick questions. Has anyone broke the 1,000 rear wheel horsepower mark yet on the Gen 3 for the Terminators? Also, how do you feel about the killer chiller on the Termies as well? Thanks.
I have not seen a 1,000 rear wheel horsepower 03 or 4 Cobra with Gen 3 yet, but I haven't seen it with very many other blowers either.
No, the Cobra is, you know, subtract 100 to 150 horsepower just because the motor doesn't have the displacement or the head flow or
anything it really needs to make power like a Gen 3 Coyote does.
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to put it in perspective of head flow, GT500s have 4 GT cylinder heads. Coyotes have a cylinder head that's even better, right?
Even better than what, 4 GT?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on where you're looking at.
Yeah.
Lift at and airflow, but I'd say broad scope, they're right on par with a Ford GT head.
Yeah. And then Cobra was still pretty early in the dual overhead cam development for the B head dual overhead cam?
No, it'd be C head.
C
so
head.
B head, for those that are watching that are interested in fun facts, are 93 to 98. And then it trickled out, went to C head in the 99 Continental Cobra, and like there's one more 4-valve. Navigator does a tumble port C head.
Oh, okay.
So the plenum volume's a little bit bigger on the intake side, and the exhaust port's shaped a little bit differently, but it's kind of like a formation of C head.
So, like we were talking about earlier, airflow. The blower's got the airflow potential. We know it has. The engine has to have the potential too. And we've seen, I think, 856 rear wheel horsepower in summer weather SAE. I think it made about 870 standard.
What was the auto car?
That was the auto car.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a manual car probably would have made 9s.
Yeah.
Manual. So it would have been close to 1,000, but I don't think it still would have made 1,000.
Hayden says, for an 11 to 14 GT, would you still recommend a Gen 2R or the Gen 3, stock engine 93 or race gas at the track build?
Depends, I guess, on what their goals are, right, Joe?
Yeah, he said an at the track build.
Uh-huh.
So I'd kind of consider that like race car status. Like if you're quantifying it as at the track.
Yeah.
Like what's a car that you build for the track, race car?
For 11 to 14, I mean, so if you're going to do this, Gen 3 is the latest and greatest. It's more money, but if you have to upgrade later on, you're going to end up spending more of that anyways. So Stage 3, Gen 3, 92 millimeter pulley to be conservative, 88 to be a little more aggressive, and let her rip.
Show.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt
good.
you. Turbinator Lou, who just asked a question to you, said, "What up, Joe? Quick question that he got his tune." He says, "Tune seems great, by the way. I don't want to go doing watt hits just yet till I get the okay from you."
Sounds good, buddy.
So, but he just kind of wanted to chime in there.
Okay.
Slab Shack says, "Pumps and heat aside, why is return style fuel systems better?"
It's just a design mechanism, really.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily say that they're better so much as for what you're able to do with the OEM controllers, doing a returnless configuration with the stock controller and upgrading the fuel pumps, they don't seem to do very well. Not necessarily the controller, kind of like the issues you have at EC5, but
yeah,
it makes the system a lot simpler.
More reliable. It brings what you need to make a lot of horsepower. It just kind of inherently brings that, and it's kind of the way all the aftermarket assembles the parts and stuff. Because factory returnless is either deadheaded with electronic control of fuel pressure and doesn't do well with transients or really high volumes of fuel or really large pumps. And then factory like internal return all built into the hat type assemblies are just limited.
With the 75 PSI pop-off valve.
Yeah, so aftermarket returnless gives you your choice of pumps, number of pumps, your adjustable pressure regulation, and then you end up having to have a return line. But like on my wife's car, the regulator's on the frame rail, so you don't even see the return line. It's not even in the engine bay. Like, it's just, it's like that's the way to bring what you need. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like the regulator could be back on top of the tank, but there's not room for it.
Exactly.
Unless you put it onto the back seat, and you really don't have fuel in the car and shit like that.
Exactly.
Jonathan wants to know, what are the benefits of upgrading to the Stage 2 intercooler for procharger? I figure lower temps, but would there be any power increase from more airflow?
Yes and yes. The base one is too small for like more than 8 or 10 pounds, right, Joe?
Yeah, anything over 10 pounds, that intercooler does not do well on Stage 1.
I mean, we've tuned ones over the years, and listen, we're positive displacement blower people. People talk about heat soak and shit like that. We've seen heat soak before, if you have a bad intercooler pump or something like that. Well, when you get a centrifugal blower on the dyno and it's 180 downstream on a summer day, as a tuner, you're just like, we're done. This thing's not going to make any power.
No, it's done and over at that point. Downstream's that high.
Yeah.
And that's relatively normal for a Stage 1 setup with a 4th or 5th gear pull. Stage 2 intercooler is definitely the way to go in those.
Poor boy has a 13 GT 6-speed with pipes and looks like pipes and X-pipe with race series MBRP, PMAS, and your 93 tune. Would I gain more horsepower with stainless work headers / X-pipe?
The headers are going to help, but I wouldn't say that you're really going to gain power from mufflers. That's kind of my 2 cents on it. Throw the headers on it. I like the way that the stainless works muffler sounds, so for whatever that's worth to you.
We don't find, like, the farther back the restriction is, the less it seems to matter, is what I find.
Although I have found that a 5/8 washer is very restrictive to cars. I had someone took his car to a shop. They did a custom resonator delete, and then he brought his car to another shop to have a blower kit installed, them not being aware of what was done in a resonator delete. But the shop had welded a 5/8 washer inside the resonator. So you'd get this really weird boost spike, like cats were bad, but it was a long tube car, so it didn't have cats. But the exhaust restriction was so great that when they took the 5/8 washers out of the resonators or just cut the resonators out, the car picked up like 120 horsepower.
I remember you telling me about that one. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Peyton says, besides boost, what do you feel is the most beneficial mod for a Coyote?
Depends on the year, Coyote, but like tuning, because it affects so many different systems. We can affect so many different things for more performance.
Yeah, I'd say next to a blower, tune's your best bet for 11 and 14 Coyote. If you're talking about hard parts, if you're not going to put a blower on it, put an 18 intake manifold on it. That's really good dollar per horsepower. And then do a set of injectors.
Well, let's talk about the intake manifold, because this is my thing with an intake manifold. 50 rear wheel horsepower at 7,500. Because I've driven a Boss, I've driven all these different Coyotes, I've driven a GT350, which revs forever. Like, a peak number means nothing if you lose all of it in 500 to 1,000 RPM. And that's what the stock intake manifold does, is it spikes up and then it drops like a rock. And you know, the first time we saw a flat power band at high RPM was the Boss. And now we've got that out of the factory 18 intake manifold that's a couple $100. I mean, more than a couple $100, $300. You know, that's to create that much area under the curve. That's what makes a car faster. And you know, you get some people, well, you know, I don't really like to shift at high RPM. But don't race then if you don't like high RPM.
Yeah, I'm of that same opinion.
Dave Murdoch wants to know if you saw the write-up on his car in Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forward, said it was a dream come true, and also says that we should have a car show here at VMP when it gets cooler.
Yes, we are going to do that. We keep talking about it. We're going to do it one day.
The grand opening of VMP.
Yes, 2 years later.
VMP South.
We're trying to get our dyno building finished, which I had some contractors over yesterday to review some plans and stuff for the dyno building, and we were going to, like, you know, try to have the grand opening when we do that. But yeah, we're going to do something, especially while it's cooler out.
Yeah.
And yes, I saw the write-up on your car in Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards. That's awesome. Congratulations. They just did a little, like, reader's rides type deal. So I'm going to tell you, they didn't mention us because we're not currently an advertiser with Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards. That's kind of the nature of the beast with those people, is they don't like to mention non-advertisers. So
I saw Nick was kind of getting salty about that in one of his posts on one of the forums.
Oh yeah, because you know, they'll talk about, I'm sure, you know, oh, we made this much power, but they don't reference the parts they made to use that much power. I mean, the magazines, it's pretty well known. They're thin.
Yeah, I'm like, I can see their whole aspect of, if we're going to talk about it, we need to get money for it. But from that same aspect, it's what's on the car. Unless it's like a sponsorship thing, I don't really see why you wouldn't mention it.
You know, I mean, listen, we're part of a community that helps support our customers. You know, and yes, we have a business that's what, you know, pays the bills and stuff like that. But yeah, at some point you have to think about what you're actually doing. And yeah, if you can't be honest about it, why are you doing it anyways?
Yeah, David he goes, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
So he didn't realize. Shane, who you answered a question about earlier regarding injectors, he was trying to hit 7 to 750. He says that sounds good for now, so 1300X it is. He says no cats, long tubes, dual fan exchanger, 4 innovation. Anyway, 4 innovation levels, 2 triple pump. What other supporting mobs do you recommend before strapping on the 2650 to the 03 Cobra with blue heads? Going to run
blue heads don't mean anything.
E85.
If you really care about what heads are on your car, don't worry about the stripe. Crawl underneath the passenger side of the car and look at the casting number on the head. If you really want the good heads, you want DC heads. DBs are decent, but they're not the final revision of the C head. So if you crawl underneath passenger side of the car, you look up just in front of the header, you'll see the full casting number, and the last 2 are the ones that really matter on a Cobra. So DB or DC. If you have like ABs, AC, something like that, it's probably an 03 that has the early heads, which can still have the blue stripe. But yeah, DB or DC is kind of where you want to be at. In terms of other supporting mods for the car, if it was me, I'd throw a good aftermarket alternator on there, like a MechMan. That's not necessarily to support the blower so much. It is. I've seen a lot of issues with stock alternators on Cobras. So MechMan, I want to say J2 Fab makes an alternator for those, or someone else with J2 does an alternator for those. Nations does it. there's a bunch of alternator manufacturers out there. Get a good aftermarket alternator on there. Hit up J2 Fab for some intercooler transfer tubes and maybe an intercooler core that's been modified.
Yeah, the Cobras need it worst of all.
Yeah, exactly. That'll really help the intercooler system work well.
And our cold air tube, our big silicone cold air tube, I mean, that's the best way to get a lot of air into that throttle body.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2:38. We have about a dozen questions here still. So I'm going to try and run through them really quickly, if you're cool with that. Maurice says, on a boosted car, would you reduce transmission torque management on a custom tune on a naturally aspirated build? What do you think about no torque management?
For the most part, I don't have a problem with it on light vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on extreme stuff, it's hard to get the factory controller to work right with the torque management that it uses on the transmission. Can you get it to work? Yeah. Is it worth the time and effort? Usually not. And then what was the other part of his question?
What do you think about no torque management?
Yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So if you're talking specifically about transmission and torque management, I think it's fine to shut it off as long as you know what you're doing. But I'd say that's specifically referring to torque management for the trans. There's other means by managing torque in other ways in the ECU. So like tip-in torque management, spark torque ratio cuts, fuel cut torque ratio, all that stuff is part of torque management.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of leave some of that stuff working the way that it needs to.
Torque requesters for decel. Mm-hmm. All right, next one, Carrie.
Nathaniel says, best IM for an NA 15 to 17 S550.
18 intake manifold. That's where it's at, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you want the be all end all and money's no real object, I'd say Cobra Jet. But if you're trying to keep things within a certain budget, I'd say the 18 intake manifolds are a really good buy.
We've answered this one a number of times on the show, but and other shows, but I'm going to throw it out there again. Justin, what does VMP stand for?
Back when I was out of high school, I called it Velocity Mustang Performance. And in 2006, we shortened it to VMP tuning. And in 2016, actually late 2015, we changed it to VMP Performance.
Derek says, what are your thoughts on this whole engine BBQ ticking sound in the 2018 Plus Mustangs? My 18 has it with almost 20,000 miles on it.
I don't think, are you familiar with that, Joe?
I've seen a few threads about it. I don't have any personal experience with it. I'll leave it at that.
Mod Motor Mafia says, did you guys run out of the triple pass heat exchangers a week or two ago?
We've been, that's actually funny. They're done, but one of the sub-assembly components just arrived at the supplier last week. Mm-hmm. So they've been drop shipped, and we'll have a pallet here probably tomorrow or the next day. Mm-hmm. So they're not out, but they're a little bit slower supply because of the drop ship and the logistics of that and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Stoker, who was talking about throwing flames earlier, says, speaking of tunes, I sent the logs for my past pulls, and I don't have cats, so should we get rid of the cat protection or just let it ride?
If you no longer have cats, we'll get rid of cat protection.
Ryan says, if I'm running your 93 tune on a ported Gen 1 with 13 to 14 GT500 injectors with dual BAPs, would I need a tune for the Gen 2R swap? Running 16 degrees and pulls half a degree from 6250 to 6500.
Just swap it on and send us a data log just so we can check it out and make sure it's fueling well. Mm-hmm. Or you can make sure that your measured lambda is good and you're around 11.5 to 1 at high RPM. And
does he, you said pulling half a degree, does he know that negative is adding and positive is?
Oh yeah, negative is adding on the 11 up ECU on the knock sensor PID.
Chad says, this is Chad Dowd, our buddy Chad Dowd.
Hey Chad.
Says, car's running great. Cannot say enough great things about the service and products I have received from VMP. Very happy with this company and the people representing it.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chad. Chad chats with me on occasion.
I gotta call you sometimes, Chad, and get caught up because it's been forever since we've talked.
On all the Mexico and street racing?
Yeah, yeah.
He's a winner, chicken dinner.
Oh, man.
Josh is coming back again, says, want to talk about heat soak. Intercooler pump on my 13 GT500 wasn't working, and the car made 302 horsepower and 402 horsepower back-to-back pulls with a 2.4 pulley and twin 67 millimeter, as well as a tune and intake. It was gutless 500 at that point. Instead of being GT 500, it was gutless 500.
Yeah.
Slab Check says, going back to his earlier question, says, so what Corsa lied about that 16 horsepower axle back? Damn it.
You know, you can get a car to show 16 horsepower with temperature changes and stuff like that. And I feel bad for some of these companies that aren't tuners because they're testing parts and they don't know how to data log all that shit. Because first you have to data log the car to make sure the engine parameters are consistent, and then you have to control your heat soak of your engine and your conditions to make sure that's accurate.
So it's not necessarily that they're lying, because that may very well be the impression that they're under, that someone bolted the cat back on and it gained 16 horsepower on the dyno.
At some point.
But I feel like in most of those cases, someone, whether it be them or the person tuning it, didn't do a very good job of monitoring controls and trying to minimize variables.
David Murdoch wants to know, when is VMP starting a show on Velocity Channel?
We're doing our own media. We're not relying on anybody else because they want big money for that shit.
Big.
You got to wait till they come to you and pay you $50,000 an episode, like, what's his name? The Gas Monkey Garage, Richard Rawlings.
Richard Rawlings.
Yeah.
Josh Stoker came back and said, thanks, gentlemen. Always a pleasure in learning more about these ponies. He's a semi-converted Mopar guy. You're selling me on them.
Awesome. Good to hear, Josh.
Nice.
Lockdown 100 says, not sure if this has been asked, but are you having any issues with your 18 manifold pigtails? I am looking to get an 18 manifold for my 17 GT and would like to keep the IMRCs.
We're not having issues with our pigtails. I know that some other manufacturers aren't wiring stuff in right, and they're having issues with people trying to run IMRCs functioning, but we don't have the issues in what you're referring to with our pigtails.
Yeah, a lot of it's tuning, having the right wiring, but also having the right tuning to go with it.
Exactly.
Ryan Reeve chimed back in. He had a question earlier. He says, if I'm running your 93 tune on a ported Gen 1 with 13 to 14 GT500 injectors, what dual BAPs would I need a tune for the Gen 2R swap? Anyway, he came back and he says it's a 2010 GT500 on 11 and up. Thank you, fellows.
Yeah, so watch the wideband, and then just shoot us a data log and we'll confirm that spark's safe for how much airflow you're making.
And with that said, we have made it through all the questions.
So, me, Rebecca, Matt, and Chris are going to American Muscle tomorrow to do some training for their CSRs. And so we'll be going to be doing Burnout Box live from Pennsylvania on Thursday. A couple other things. We are on podcast, both on iTunes and Google Play. So check us out on there if you want to listen to Burnout Box or Tuning Tuesday while you drive to work. We
have links in the descriptors now for the podcast
perfect.
as well,
okay.
So people can grab them there.
And I know John Hartman's using the podcast deal, listening to the podcast. BOOSTane is going to be here next week, so I'm excited to talk to them and get into more of the real technical aspect of how BOOSTane works, why it works. Talk about some best tuning practices. Talk about me and Joe's experience with it. And we've got some goodies that just came in today that we got to get up on the website. Small and large VMP Gen 3 stickers.
Are those designed to go on a painted surface or a window?
So the sticker manufacturer we use uses a pretty good quality adhesive. If you let it bake in the sun, it will eventually become permanent. But the idea is that it does not. It takes like 5 years for that to occur.
Okay.
So, and the Mylar stickers are a little more permanent than the vinyl stickers. So if you're going to put it on paint, I'd use the bigger one. It's a little thicker material, so when you do go to peel it off,
it will not rip as easily.
Yeah.
Turn into little confetti shreds.
But we actually think about that. Like, I don't want to sell a bunch of people, give people cheap ass stickers. They're going to tear their shit up.
We have 2 questions that just came in. See if we can get them. Thanks for everything today. Would E85 be advantageous for nitrous?
In some ways, yes. E85 is advantageous for nitrous.
I have an E85 tune and they have E15 here. Can I run that? Would it be better?
If you have an E85 tune, do not run E15.
E15 is like basically 93. Let's
Yeah.
just call it 93.
Yeah.
And that's it?
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Have a good day, guys.